Let's start over, and I apologize for that. I had my mic off the first round. We have two items on the agenda tonight. First is Ordinance 2205 to vacate public parcels regarding two 16.5-foot wide alley segments located between West 1st Street, West 2nd Street, South Rogers Street, and South Morton Street, City of Bloomington Redevelopment Commission petitioner. The second item is Ordinance 2206 to amend Title B of the Bloomington Municipal Code entitled Historic Preservation and Protection to establish a historic district regarding Johnson's Creamery Historic District. So, and with that, let's move to the first amendment, the first item for tonight. Again, that is Ordinance 2205 to vacate public parcels regarding two 16.5-foot wide alley segments located between West 1st Street, West 2nd Street, South Rogers Street, and South Morton Street. City of Bloomington Redevelopment Commission petitioners. The synopsis is as follows. The petitioner, City of Bloomington Redevelopment Commission, requests vacation of two segments of alley right-of-way, the first between West 1st Street and West 2nd Street, and the second, an alley that runs east-west between South Morton Street and a 16.5-foot platted alley to the west, in order to facilitate Phase 1 east of the Hopewell development. The right-of-way will be replaced with new sections of South Madison Street and West University Street. Okay. And we may have members of the public who are here to comment on this issue, and so I wanted to take a moment and talk about the order of presentation. We'll hear first from city staff, then we'll come to council for any questions and clarification, then comments from the public, and then we'll come to discussion and voting on a recommendation tonight. So with that, I believe we have Mr. Robinson with us and Mr. Seabour and Mr. Durkis.
I believe that Mr. Seabour and Mr. Robinson are participating remotely, and we're having a little bit of a technical issue in that they cannot hear, which we're trying to resolve.
Please stand by.
How about click on that and say unmute? I don't know.
I think that'll give me a lot of feedback. Sorry, guys. So when I unmute.
Is anybody's laptop on the dais not muted? We need to make sure you're all muted. And over here, make sure you're muted. Mine's muted.
So now hold on. That's not it.
Miss Lacey, can you unmute the room? Scott, can you hear us now?
Mr. Robinson, are you with us?
So wait, they can hear now.
Thank you to everyone for your patience.
Scott, can you speak and let us know if you can hear us?
This is Andrew. I can hear you.
Oh, great. All right. I think we've sorted it.
Nope, that's fine. It happens.
So I think they will have missed, and the other folks on Zoom, which there are several members of the public, will have missed the introduction. So maybe you can just give a very abbreviated rundown real quick.
Of the synopsis?
I would just go to the first item and just mention what that is again.
Again, thank you to everyone for your patience. We are experiencing some technical difficulties, but we are working on Ordinance 2205 to vacate public parcels regarding two 16.5-foot wide alley segments located between West 1st, West 2nd, South Rogers, and South Morton Street. City of Bloomington Redevelopment Commission petitioners. And would you recommend that we go on to our second agenda item, or are we close, do you think?
I believe Mr. Robinson.
Ms. Gamberlary, can you hear me now?
Yes, wonderful.
Oh, thank you. Sorry.
Okay, Mr. Robinson, welcome. Thank you. Please go ahead.
Again, sorry for the technical delays. Seems to be working on my end, and apologies for the delay. My name is Scott Robinson. I'm the Planning and Transportation Director for the City of Bloomington. I'm here tonight to give an overview of the Ordinance 22-05. It's a right-of-way vacation request. This is as part of the Hopewell neighborhood redevelopment. I'm going to share my screen here, and hopefully I can navigate that so everybody is able to see that. Just give me a second here to be able to do that. Are you able to see my screen?
Yes, we are. Please go ahead whenever you're ready.
Okay, great. Thank you. So the first slide, I want to provide an overview of the area being considered. To your north, the area that's being bound by 2nd Street. To the east is the Beeline Trail or Morton Street, and to the south is 1st Street, and obviously to the west is South Rogers Street. So the image before you is a diagram of the existing lots and the proposed lots that were being considered. I just want to provide a context to this area. This area we are referring to as Phase 1 East as part of the Hopewell neighborhood redevelopment. What I did on this drawing is just to help orient everybody. You can see some blue boxes here on the upper right and upper left and lower right, as well as some lots with some clouds around those. I will talk a little bit about that briefly just to help orient everyone on existing lots and the proposed lots that are being considered. So again, up in the kind of northwest corner, we have lots 1A and 1B. You go to the northeast, or to the upper right, we have lots 7A, 7B, and 7C. And then the lower right down here, you have a bunch of lots 5A through 5G. All of these lots were based on the recommendation of the Bloomington Hospital Site Redevelopment Master Plan. If you recall, this plan wrapped up a process and a report back in January 2021. With the plating exercise of this, staff used the background of that document that had a vision for this block as well as other portions of the redevelopment of Hopewell neighborhood. It also had a recommendation of the mixed use medium scale zoning district, which was rezoned to this. And so that's the basis for some of the zoning, or excuse me, the lot sizes being proposed. So again, the lot sizes are being dictated by the zoning district. So they're base standards with a minimum lot width of 50 feet and a maximum area of 5,000 square feet or roughly 0.15 acres. So that's the minimum size. And so through this exercise, staff with their consultants looked at reconfiguring the lots based on the ownership of IU Health, which will eventually transfer that ownership to the City of Bloomington. In setting that up, that will allow for building demolition, utility relocation, and other activities that we hope to begin sometime in early June. The master plan called out for residential units, mixed uses in this area. And just to kind of give you a concept of what was envisioned for these lots, again, the areas up in the upper left, lots 1, have a vision between 80 and 130 units. Lot 7 up in the upper right or northeast, 70 to 110 units. And then lots on the lower right or southeast, 60 to 90 units. And you can see the lot configurations are different sizes. This is to create a variety of redevelopment opportunities for some larger developments and smaller developments as we envision rebuilding the site. So again, I just wanted to help with this slide, provide some orientation to the context of what's being considered as part of the first phase of redevelopment of the Hopewell neighborhood. This next slide is taking some of the renderings, overlaying that information over the plat. This is taken from the master plan. It's showing some trees and building footprints, streets and what have you. I want to point everyone's attention to the rectangle boxes shaded in red. That's what's before council's consideration discussion tonight on Ordinance 22-05. As you can see, these are existing right-of-ways. There are alleys, so they're about 12.5 feet wide. And as you overlay them with the new lot configuration and the vision seen for this neighborhood, you see they kind of bisect kind of what we anticipate the future of this build out is, or that was envisioned from the master plan. And so the reason behind the alley vacation request is the city is asking to vacate these alleys. After the property is transferred to the city, there won't be any buildings that these alleys would be serviced. The utilities will be relocated to new locations and there'll be new right-of-way established with the redevelopment of this site. And if you recall in that prior slide, I had the 2 lots with the clouds on those. Those are 2 lots that would be part of a linear park or a greenway, so much larger green space as part of the redevelopment of this site. And the last slide, just for context, is just highlighting what the plans are for redevelopment, and again, establishing new public right-of-way. For reference, the existing right-of-way that's being asked to vacate it is still shown on this rendition here. But what the highlighted in blue here, what this does is it does create more traditional street grid for this block. Without that, we kind of had a super block, one that's very large, distance between streets. These are 2 new streets that are connecting existing streets within the city, an extension of University and extension of Madison. So then we have created essentially 4 neighborhood blocks with replatting and reorganization of the land. I'd also like to point out, again, the new greenway. It's just to the north of the new extension of University Street. Again, this area is being created as a part of a linear park connection to the Beeline Trail and continuing on west as the redevelopment of the Hopewell neighborhood continues. And then last, I'd just like to kind of talk a little about the criteria that was established years ago with City Council on considering vacations of right-of-way. And in my opinion, there's 5 criteria. So the first was current access to the property. As you can see with the transfer of the property, as IU Health transfers that to the city, those existing vacant right-of-ways really don't serve any purpose because the existing buildings will be demolished. And again, there does not serve any need to be accessing those sites. The future status, as I showed in slides 2 and 3, really establish the reconfiguration and rethinking of how can we redevelop this large super block into a more traditional neighborhood scale redevelopment. It reconfigures new public right-of-way and new street connections. So there's access to those sites. Private ownership, the existing right-of-way will be transferred over to the city. So again, that doesn't really have any impact as far as the ownership of the property. Once the city sells the lots, if vacated, those will be turned into private property where there'll be access for redevelopment and turn that property into taxable property taxable revenues. Compliance, all the standards that were met with the Unified Development Ordinance and other standards. The primary plat was approved by the Plan Commission on February 7th of 2022. So what's being proposed is compliant. So there wouldn't be anything that the vacation of right-of-way would imply that there isn't anything non-compliant. And lastly, as I kind of highlighted in the first or the second two slides, is this really very closely relates to the master plan or the Bloomington Hospital site redevelopment master plan. So with that, I will be happy to answer any questions. If there's some technical questions, we do have our consultant available to be able to answer any of those. But again, I apologize for some of the technical issues on my end. And again, thanks Ms. Camilleri for your patience and members of the public. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Robinson. Did Mr. Seabour have anything to add? I had noted that he was with us as well.
Thanks for that. I don't have anything to add at this time. I think Mr. Robinson's presentation covered all the high points. I'm here to help answer any questions you might have.
Great, thank you. Let's come to council then for questions. Okay, Councilmember Sims.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. Robinson. Did I hear you just say that the vacated alleys would become private property once it starts to being developed? Or did I miss it?
No, so, you know, it's part of the criteria, the private ownership. So if council decides to vacate the right-of-ways, as it stands now in the near future, that would turn over to the city once the IU Health transfers the property to the city. Moving forward, the city intends to sell these lots, which would have the, you know, if you think of those red portions over the new lots configured, that would be sold to somebody, but that's after the fact. But again, I think the focus is looking at the intent of the right-of-way. So there aren't any current uses there, or in the very near future, there won't be. This property will be transferred over to the city. So there really isn't any kind of quote unquote private ownership considerations for the existing right-of-way. Once it gets to once it's vacated, then these lots will be sold in the future for redevelopment. Does that answer your question, Mr. Sims?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank
I
you.
probably didn't do a very good job of explaining that in my presentation. I apologize.
Thank you. Councilmember Rollo.
Thank you. Mr. Robinson, so alleys are, besides utility services and so forth, they're also used for bike and ped connectivity. And my first question is, do those alleys extend north, south, and or east at this point? Are we breaking some kind of content?
I believe the existing alleys does not connect to the north. I'm not 100% sure to the south. There's some parking lots, and I don't know the exact ownership of some of those parking lots to the south. The one that's existing, the kind of one, the half stub into the site doesn't connect anywhere. So again, it's kind of a dead end alley per se. So I can take a closer look on GIS, but yes, these really don't really establish or reconnect any existing alleys.
So you would say we're not breaking any contiguity with of an alley network by vacating these?
No, not by vacating them. And I know your decision's based on the vacation, but I think looking towards the future, your criteria and the future status, we are creating, 2 streets, neighborhood streets, and a pretty significant linear park that accommodates bicycle and pedestrians to the Beeline Trail.
That seems obvious with the linear park. How about the Madison Street? Will that have, obviously we'll have sidewalks, will it have biking facilities?
Oh, yeah. Yes, it will. It's being built to city standards for a neighborhood street. There'll be, maybe Mr. Seaborg can answer the specifics on that, but it's being built per the transportation plan guidance with those street widths and accommodations on those streets.
Okay, so complete streets is the aim. Is that right, Mr. Seaborg?
Yes, that is correct. The Madison Street will not have like an exclusive bicycle facility, like a bike lane. It's anticipated to be a relatively low volume, local, like almost like a neighborhood street. So there will be just sidewalks and really trying to create a slow street environment. The East-West Street, University Street will have, again, no bike lane exclusively, but it will have very wide sidewalks and that park-like facility that will also have additional wide paths as well.
Okay, maybe next time could we see that maybe drawn into these maps, specifically the bike facilities, whether or not there's a pathway or not? I think I know what you're saying, but just for next week's consideration.
We can put something together for next week's presentation.
Yeah, even like a rendering of the street view, what it will look like. Thanks.
Thank you. Additional council questions? Okay. Seeing none, let's go to the public for any comment, particularly on Ordinance 2205. If you are participating virtually, please use the raise hand function in Zoom or type a message in chat, and our hosts will be watching for that and let us know if there are any comments. Can I get a sense? We have one commenter here. Are there other comments? I want to get a sense of how much time to allow. I'm just seeing one commenter.
Yeah.
Okay.
There are none in Zoom presently.
Okay, sounds good. Let's take 5 minutes, and if you could take care of that, Ms. Lacy. Great.
Before you start my clock, can I use the overhead?
Oh, sure. We will. And sir, as staff sets that up, could you please sign in so we have your name?
Yes.
And then if you would state your full name for the record.
Yeah, my name is Mark Cornett.
And you'll have 5 minutes, Mr. Cornett.
Okay, don't start me.
Okay, we won't start you, we promise.
Why, I don't see it. Oh. Yeah. It's back there. Okay. Can we turn it, or what would you do? Zoom out? Zoom out? More? I can scroll down. Well, I got to see all 3 at one time. Is there any way to zoom out? Zoom out all the way right now. Okay, that's the other way. All right. Okay, that's pretty close. My name is Mark Cornett, local architect and urbanist, and I spent a lot of time looking at the hospital site. And it sounds fairly innocuous tonight to talk about vacating alleys, and I would agree that maybe they're not in the right locations. And David, to answer your question, Councilman Rallo, the alley between Rogers and Madison does go north, and the alley between Madison and Morton goes south. So they don't connect terrifically, but there is some connection. The plat of 1818, the middle one, B, shows that the downtown, the entirety of the downtown was platted at 8 lots per block, 5 lots per acre. Those lots are 8,716 square feet each. The bottom diagram, C, is what happened to the downtown over time. The lots got smaller. So for any of us that are looking at the historic core of the downtown as representative of the community of Bloomington, that's where it evolved from B to C. There's 18 lots instead of 8, and the alley patterns are still intact. I think that's really important. And A is the keynote block of this first platting is the block at the corner of 2nd and Morton. It confronts the Beeline Trail and confronts 2nd Street. They're proposing 4 lots. We are guaranteeing rental development of a scale that I think we're not all in agreement of that's happening in our community. When the scales get wrong, you get garage doors, narrow sidewalks, storm sewer cover enclosures on the top right that you have to walk around, and so on. But you get very little urbanity in these places, and we can go outside and walk across the street and see this. This is Bloomington. And it's a fragile thing. It seems like it doesn't really matter if we remove alleys, if we make parcels a little bit bigger. And then we turn around and say, how come we don't get this? How come we don't get this delivered to us as a community? Where are those projects when it comes time to have the rubber meet the road? So I'm proposing tonight a revisit of this simplistic platting direction. There should be 11 or 12 lots on the first block in the northeast. There should be 10 or 11 lots to the west on the north along 2nd. There should be multiple lots similar to what they already have on the southern block, and then you have a liner condition around that deadly medical building that sits in there just west of Rogers, north of 1st Street. That's going to really disconnect the urbanism. This is not rocket science. It's really simple. It's based on our history. It's based on our community. If you vacate alleys, put them back in the correct locations. It's really imperative to keep the dimensions of the individual parcels contained so that you end up with the historic patterns that we love of our community. We are abandoning them right now. You're getting ready to vote on an abandonment of those patterns. And I don't think we should do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cornett. And could we return the screen? Thank you. Okay. Additional public comment. I'm not seeing any in chambers. Have any speakers raised their hands on Zoom?
Yes, we have one speaker on Zoom.
Okay.
That person should be able to unmute.
Welcome. If you would, please share your full name, and then you'll have 5 minutes.
Hi, my name is Jan Sorby, and I didn't really intend on speaking to this tonight, but I had to recall that a city council person once said to me, when I was talking about where we could, the need for more core neighborhood. And they said, well, Jan, where are we going to find more core neighborhood? And I think that this is a wonderful opportunity to do so. And I have to agree with Mark Cornett that this historic pattern is really, really important. And that's basically all I wanted to say, is that Yes, on the surface, it looks like, oh, you're just vacating a couple of alleys. But in fact, the points that he made were really, really key to how the rhythms and the patterns of buildings come together to make a sense of community. And to the south and to the north, you have these existing patterns. And to the east, you have this existing pattern, and to the west. So that's all I have to say is really, I think this is an important decision. Thank you very much for letting me speak.
Thank you, Ms. Sorby. Ms. Lacey, are there additional individuals interested in commenting? No. Okay, and seeing none here in chambers, let's come back to council for questions. Okay, Councilmember Sandberg, Rolla, then Piedmont Smith.
My question is, how many years have we been in the planning stages for this new redevelopment, this new neighborhood that we're literally building with the gift of the old hospital site? And are the plans for its development truly baked in at this point? Is there no more room for discussion of how better it could be laid out to be a more historically residential neighborhood as opposed to the mixed uses that are currently before us? And this could be for either, I assume, Mr. Robinson.
Thanks, Ms. Sandberg, for your question. I guess, you know, if you recall, there was a pretty big effort for the redevelopment of the former hospital site. That final report was issued in January of 2021. There's a purchase agreement with UHealth that the city is working with to transfer that ownership to the city. So things that keep in mind on this particular consideration is the vacation of right-of-way. As far as, you know, is there room to rethink about building, you know, what's going to redevelop in this area? Sure, there absolutely are opportunities to look at types of development, changing the Unified Development Ordinance and other things. But I think, again, the criteria that was led before council is on the vacation of the right-of-way. So while I think it's helpful to have a context of looking at how this one block of a much larger 24 acre area that's being redeveloped, there are opportunities for connecting to those neighborhoods. There are opportunities for different types of ownership. And so, you know, I think there's been a lot of time and energy spent on implementing the master plan that was envisioned. That is clearly detailed in what was shared, and there was many people that had participated in that vision. So, you know, I think if I could say that, is this an opportunity to go back and rethink the lot sizes? I do want to point out it was zoned and mixed use medium, which I said in the beginning. There's some minimum lot size standards that we have to follow. That creates challenges and opportunities for redevelopment and reconfiguring the lots. So if you want the desire to have smaller lots, we'd have to rezone that. That's a process. That takes time. If there's an opportunity to for a redevelopment to buy, there's no guarantee if somebody has smaller lots that a developer might want to come in and buy multiple lots to do something larger. The third point, the master plan clearly identified opportunities for mixed use in residential housing. And I outlined those housing numbers that were identified in this block. Again, smaller lots could certainly attain that, but I think the master plan, actually I don't think, I know definitely the master plan identified the scale and context for this block. And that's what we're trying to achieve moving forward. So aside from the alley vacation, I think that if it's decided to leave those in place, that might not be in the best interest of trying to attain what was envisioned in the master plan. It does create some challenges to access and connectivity some of the lots and reconfiguring. It will cause delay in time to redevelop that area and go back to the Plan Commission. So, it's certainly worth a discussion, but I think as far as what this will look like and how it will build out, there's opportunity for that. So I think that's my point here, is that nothing's baked as far as what is to come, but the request before you is looking at the alley vacations and what purpose they serve today, and hopefully that answers your question.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Rallo.
So Mr. Cornett displayed a rendering of the historic pattern of the downtown as it might appear here on this site. Was that considered in the design process? The historic pattern? Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, Mr. Rallo.
No, I'll leave it there. I have maybe a follow-up. Was the historic design, the historic rendering of the pattern of downtown, was it considered in this particular area?
So as far as the historic pattern and context, I don't have the exact page of the master plan, but there's a page that kind of takes the historic footprint and emulates that over to the area of what it is and what it's envisioned. So that is reflected in the overall master plan. Again, it's consistent with what this block is the renderings that I showed. Unfortunately, I was not able to see the drawings that Mr. Cornett was showing. I was trying to understand the connectivity, the alleys. I don't know if I was looking at the aerials. I don't know if that's necessarily the case, that these do connect to the north and south. But again, I think as far as the historic pattern, these blocks that are being considered are the 300-foot block sizes that are traditional in our neighborhoods. The scale is a density of 3 stories that is consistent with what's in our downtown. So I think, the vision of perhaps what was being suggested is consistent with what I see is for this block. It's just probably a matter of opinion or difference of opinion.
Okay, well, I mean, it's clear there's street connectivity, so that was implicit in the design of this site. But the alleys, I guess, were assumed to be vacated at some point. I mean, it was, were they ever considered to be maintained?
The master plan did not identify alleys to be maintained in this block. There is mention of alleys and considerations in other segments of the larger property or the larger hospital site, but not within this block.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Councilmember Piedmont Smith.
I think my question maybe has been answered by Mr. Robinson, but let me just make sure. So my question is, can alleys be put back into this block or this, well, what's going to be turned into 4 blocks later on in the process?
So I guess the choice before you tonight or with this ordinance is to vacate those alleys. If you choose not to, then we would have to keep those in place and look at reconfiguring the lots. Could future alleys be put in? I suppose they could. Both of those would require a replatting effort and possibly a reconfiguration of the infrastructure that's been planned out. Those have financial costs for those design changes. They have financial costs for those hookups. So there are implications for these kind of changes being discussed. We learned today one of those challenges to the number of lots and lot sizes is providing sewer and water to these lots. There's a cost of that, and that's something that the city is going to bear those costs for this redevelopment. So that is something to be considered as part of the process of redesigning the plat and moving forward. I think the other consideration to think about with alleys is the challenge of maintaining alleys. It's complicated depending on where we are in the city. With that, generally these alleys weren't probably heavily maintained, largely just mostly with the city. So I think Ms. Piedmont-Smith, I think that answered your question, but to kind of start all over again, there are certainly costs associated with that. And staff is following the guidance that was established in the master plan for this block. Does that answer your question?
Yes, but yes. And may I follow up with one more? I just pulled up the master plan, and I see it, at least conceptually, there is certainly a lot of space between buildings that pedestrians and cyclists could use, even if, even though there may be no new alleys put in. So is that, would you characterize the master plan as considering connectivity for pedestrians and bicyclists as a priority?
Oh, absolutely. I think it would be hard to say that either the extension of University Street or Madison Street, that it meets the level of the transportation plan, the standards on the widths of sidewalks, the tree plots. If you look at the total area that we're talking about, there's a pretty significant acreage broken out for each of these streets. So the widths of these streets, as well as the linear park. I don't have those numbers off the top of my head. I think those future public right-of-ways and accesses will be pretty significant overall from the park, or from the overall area. The second thing, kind of going back to redevelopment, kind of what was envisioned here, if the alleys are left in place and or if future alleys are desired, you're consuming more land, which means there's less opportunity for housing, less opportunity for redevelopment. And so I think that's the challenge of trying to maximize what was envisioned for this block. Now, again, there's other areas within this larger hospital site redevelopment that do offer different types of housing, neighborhood scale, and some alley loaded connections. So just to keep that in mind.
Thank you.
Thank you. Additional questions from council? Okay. Seeing none, would anyone like to offer a comment? Councilmember Rollo?
I'll be passing this evening to consider this a bit more. That's all. Thanks.
Thank you. Additional comments? Councilmember Piedmont-Smith?
Yeah, I'm happy to support the vacation of these alleys. I may have been more involved than some of my colleagues in the hospital redesign since I was on the steering committee. But I'm confident that the master plan as a whole does significantly increase connectivity, especially for bicyclists and pedestrians. So I'm not concerned about vacating these alleys. Furthermore, I actually think that this item could have been just sent directly to a second hearing because it's a pretty straightforward item. So I just want to mention that for the benefit of my colleagues. Next time we come across something that is pretty straightforward like this. Thank you.
Thank you. Additional comment? Councilmember Smith?
Thank you. And thank you for your presentation. And I think I can support this. The historical precedent is important to think about, and to mirror it in this site. I'm not an architect, I'm not an urbanist. It seems to make sense that we make it fit the master plan that's been developed over the years, and that then it allows for someone to come in and be able to, make it more attractive for them to develop. And so I'll be supporting it. Thank you.
Thank you. Additional comment? Okay, would anyone like to offer a recommendation?
Move to pass.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. I'll start on my far left. Councilmember Piedmont Smith?
Yes.
Councilmember Smith?
Yes.
Councilmember Rollo?
Pass.
I will vote yes. Councilmember Sandberg?
Yes.
Councilmember Sims?
Yes.
Thank you. That is 5 yes, 0 no, and 1 pass for the evening. Thank you, everyone. Okay. Moving on to our next item of business. This is Ordinance 2206 to amend Title 8 of the Bloomington Municipal Code entitled Historic Preservation and Protection to establish a historic district regarding the Johnson's Creamery Historic District. And the synopsis is as follows. This ordinance amends Chapter 8.20 of the Bloomington Municipal Code entitled The List of Designated Historic Districts in order to designate Johnson's Creamery as a historic district. The Bloomington Historic Preservation Commission, after a public hearing on March 10th, 2022, recommended that the structure be designated historic with a rating as notable. This rating was based on certain historic and architectural criteria set forth in Bloomington Municipal Code 8.08.101C, E, entitled Historic District Criteria. Local designation will provide the protection needed to ensure that this property is preserved. And again, the process, just to talk through it, we may have members of the public, I believe we have members of the public who will want to speak on this issue. So the order of presentation, we'll hear first from city staff, then possibly the property owner, I believe, and then members of the public before coming back to council for discussion and voting on a recommendation for tonight. So with that, I believe we have Mr. Zodi with us and Ms. Colombrania.
Yes, Councilmember Skimblary, John Zodi, the director. And I will, serving the council or the committee, I'll turn it over to Ms. Colombrania to sort of go through the presentation about the Creamery, and appreciate council's consideration.
Great, thank you. Ms. Colombrania, welcome. And could I trouble you to pull the mic a little closer, please? Thank you.
Okay, good evening, council members and the public. Yes, so I'm Maria Colombrania, the Historic Preservation Program Manager in the Housing and Neighborhood Development Department at the City of Bloomington. And today I'm going to be presenting the nomination for Johnson's Creamery. So Johnson's Creamery is located on 400 West 7th Street. It was built in 1914 and then had additions throughout the years until 1951. This is an industrial building and it has been rated as notable. Wait 1 second. So this site is already in the National Register of Historic Places, and it is also located within the West Side Historic District, also located in the National Register of Historic Places. The owners are Creamery Development, and the petitioners are the Bloomington Historic Preservation Commission. I am presenting, you can see presented the proposed historic site boundary by the Historic Preservation Commission, and we can talk about that later. I believe that will be a topic of conversation. And yes, so as was already stated, the designation proceedings began on March 10, 2022. We believe as staff that the Johnson's Creamery meets the following criteria for local historic district designation. It exemplifies the cultural, political, economic, social, or, and I would say, and historic heritage of this community. In terms of architectural criteria, owing to its unique location or physical characteristics, it represents an established and familiar visual feature of the city. Instead of or, I'm going to say, and it exemplifies the built environment in an era of history characterized by a distinctive architectural style. So Johnson's Creamery provides a visual history of Bloomington's industrial heyday as the original structure, with its original structure and subsequent additions that trace the history of the industrial and food processing innovation in the 20th century. The Johnson brothers, I have their names here, Ellis W. and Ward W. Johnson, actually moved to Bloomington from Orange County in the early 20th century to start this dairy, producing dairy. And they were the main producers for not only Bloomington, but the general Monroe County, using not only supplying dairy to people's houses and providing a lot of work. It was once rated the 4th most important industry in Bloomington after stonemasonry industry, after the furniture, Showers Brothers factory, which we are in right now, and after Indiana University. The building is very interesting because it was altered throughout time as technology changed. So they first came to produce butter and ice cream, and then they also started pasteurizing milk when that technology came into play. They also provided the ice for ice boxes in all the houses, and most houses that had refrigerators or ice boxes in Bloomington. So they actually had a large storage container because ice could only be made in winter. So they had tons of ice, and after that technology left, they switched out and changed the spaces for other uses. They also were very creative and changed the types of ice cream they made. So they were an integral part to Bloomington's foodways and food industry throughout the 20th century for about 75 years. They also sourced all of their produce from Bloomington. So I talked about the Ferris House the last time I presented in front of all of you, council members. And the Ferris family produced a lot of the milk where IU Stadium and all of these other sports complexes north of town are located right now. So it's all part of this network that has made Bloomington what it is over the years. So I also wanted to mention that the smokestack, standing at 140 feet high, was part of said developments. It was the replacement for a previous even taller smokestack, and I will show you a picture soon, that measured 240 feet high. So yeah, I just also wanted to mention that the smokestack did employ up to 100 people at its peak, and the company itself was very involved in sponsoring sports teams and involved within the community. And they provided a lot of the ice cream used at Indiana University for different events, fraternities, sororities, and throughout town. And here are a few additional pictures. Here we go. I wanted to, if you look, oh, sorry, I can't really zoom in, but if you look towards the top of the aerial photograph, you can see both smokestack. The small one is the current smokestack. So here are a few more images, and I am available for questions. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Zodi, did you want to add or show anything? Okay, but you're available for questions.
Absolutely.
Great. All right. And then do we have anyone from the property owners from Peerless who wanted to comment? All right.
They are online.
Are they,
Via Zoom.
they're here in person, or they're, I can't quite see behind you.
Sorry, they are online.
Ah, okay.
I'll just mention Michael Cordero and Christine Bartlett are both here, I believe, representing the property owner, and both are co-hosts on Zoom and should be able to unmute and start their video if they have anything to add at this time.
Hello, good evening, everyone. Can you hear me all right?
Yes, good evening, welcome. So, Mr. Cordero, please go ahead.
Thank you for having me today. My name is Michael Cordero. I am the founder and owner of Peerless Development. We do have Christine Bartlett with us, who is our counsel on this. We're here today, I guess I could start by giving a little history, but also, ultimately we're here today to discuss the designation of the Johnson Creamery and the creation of this historic district. We did purchase this property in 2019, and part of the draw was the iconic nature of the smokestack and the structure. It's unique. It did lend a certain amount of visibility to the site that we thought was very unique and interesting. But ultimately, as it sits today, we have a structure that has been deemed to be unsafe. We've been issued an order. A lot of the discussion around this, the designation, leaves out the fact that the hand department has issued us an unsafe building order, and we're required to demolish this down to no more than 60 feet. We've conducted multiple engineering reports on the smokestack, and that has been determined to be the highest height that the smokestack can remain and still comply with current building code. So I did want to just mention that. We did spend many hours, hundreds of hours, and time and money trying to get grants, state-funded grants, to help repair and maintain the smokestack and keep it as tall as we could. Ultimately, we were not given any funding for that, and subsequent deterioration and another engineering report later sort of landed us here today. So the next piece that I kind of want to discuss, as Gloria said, was the proposed boundary of this map. We are developers. We do have an intention of developing a multifamily apartment building on the north half of this site. We have plans that have been approved by the Planning Commission that we're working through, our construction and building permits right now. But the proposed boundary map that was drawn by staff goes over, what we have as a proposed subdivision line, and it also goes right through the bottom portion of our approved building. So, we raised that as a concern at the HPC meeting when they ultimately approved the ordinance that's been presented to you. And we've subsequently drawn new maps to basically just follow the foundation of the building, which we think it satisfies our goal of not interfering with our improved and proposed development, and also, allowing for the protection of the Johnson's Creamery building, which we think is the most important piece. The next thing that I wanted to discuss with you all was ultimately the removal of the designation of the smokestack under the this historical district. I did send an email to the council members last week stating the factors, in Bloomington Municipal Code 0808070 calls for the factors needed for removal of designation of a historic district. And I went through and sort of replied. There were a couple that didn't really apply to us, but under each other factor, the smokestack itself would qualify for removal of designation. And we're already going through issues with the HPC where they're asking us to fund a public art installation in the neighborhood of $100,000 to $150,000, which we don't think that HPC has authority to do that, and we won't agree to it. So I don't want this to become a contested issue. We want to get the smokestack to a safe height and not be troubled or, and be in a conflict situation to do that work. So we do hope that as you guys are considering this ordinance, that you will consider these factors and either eliminate the smokestack from the boundary map or eliminate that structure from, as one of the designated structures within the boundary map. And we do hope that you would consider the boundary map that we proposed, which will eliminate future discrepancies of our approved apartment project. And we're happy, I'm here and there's others from my team. We're happy to answer any other questions that might come up tonight.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cordero. Ms. Lacey and perhaps the presenters, allow me to suggest too, we've got multiple maps being discussed. So if you could have those at the ready to be projected, I think that would be helpful. So I would offer that suggestion. And then let's come back to council for council questions. So Councilmember Sandberg.
Thank you. I have two questions, one for the petitioner or the developer, another for Ms. Colombrania. But let me start with you, Mr. Cordero. When you purchased the site for development for this multifamily project, you had purchased it with the Creamery building intact and the smokestack intact. Your intent was to incorporate that into the design of the, I'm a little confused as to what your ownership of now the Johnson Creamery and the smokestack entails and how you had intended to incorporate that into your development. I think you're muted.
Sorry about that. When we purchased the property, the intention was for it to be sort of a two-phased investment. Phase one would be to design and build the apartment building, and phase two would be to ultimately upgrade the Johnson Creamery office building. And then the smokestack, obviously you see the antennas. We bought it with a tenant in place. AT&T leases space there for their cellular equipment. We did have an initial assessment done, and we assumed that we would have some maintenance to do. But I think the facts are that the smokestack just continues to deteriorate and has moved beyond a repairable state. So I hope that answers your question. We did intend to keep it and thought that AT&T would stay there and we would continue, and it would just be a part of our property that we own.
And if I could just follow up with that line of questioning, when did you discover the deterioration of the smokestack and its potential danger? And at that point, you decided you did not want that to be incorporated into your planning? Or at what point did your decision change to want this not to be a part of your responsibility as the owner of the property currently?
Well, I think it's still part of our responsibility, and that's partly why we're here. We're responsible for demolishing it down to a safe height. To answer your question specifically, in early 2020, we received a notice from our property manager who actually leases space in the Johnson's Creamery building that bricks were starting to spall off of the smokestack and fall down from high heights. So he roped off a section around it to ensure that nobody was hit by a falling piece of brick. At that time, we began discussions with AT&T, the tenant, to figure out what needed to be done to repair it. A an assessment there was calling for basically the AT&T equipment to come down, the chimney to be dismantled about 20 feet, 15 to 20 feet, and then either capped there or potentially rebuilt back. Even that amount of work, one, AT&T coming down, they had a whole slew of coordination that they need to do on their side. That equipment services the Sheriff's Department, I believe, IU Health, and other local services. So these are important dedicated service lines. So they needed time to figure out what their temporary plan would be. So we went through about 8 or 9 months of planning and coordination, and in the meantime, trying to figure out how to fund the repair of this. That's when we were led to the OSHA grant, which we applied for. And ultimately, I think in that time, it continued to deteriorate. During that time, AT&T decided that it was way too costly for them to temporarily move, and they ended up finding another location. And they're in the process of getting their permits and constructing the new tower to move their equipment to.
All right, thank you very much, and I'll save my question for Ms. Colombrania to the next round.
Thank you. Okay, additional questions from council? Councilmember Rallo.
I wondered if, with the historic preservation status, if grants may come available. Do you have any information related to that?
So, at this point, it is already a National Register site, and grants are available, but they are very competitive. And so that's the issue. We do have an in-house grant, the facade grant. It's not very big, but that's kind of where we are at in-house. There are other, like most of the federal things are more in that different jurisdiction where it already exists, statewide as well. So basically the federal jurisdiction provides a lot of carrots in that regard, but doesn't provide a lot of protective power if changes are going to happen.
Okay, do you know the amount of the facade grant? Are we talking tens of thousands?
So the facade grant is technically $10,000, and it needs to be matched. It's used usually by local businesses and nonprofit organizations, and it's a BUEA grant that is hosted with historic preservation. And it can be doubled or tripled in very certain, I need to verify this, but it's usually a maximum of $10,000.
I seem to remember that we might have used that on the Batman House on Kirkwood.
I will need to verify, but it has been used at many different businesses and nonprofits in this area.
And I think it might have been more, but thank you for that. It would be helpful maybe to find out what monies are available. Thank you.
Thank you. Additional items from council. Councilmember Smith.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Cordero. I want to ask, to clarify for me, you're proposing, an alteration in the map to not include the stack. Do I understand that correctly?
We had initially proposed a map that would include the stack, but ultimately requested that the structure of the smokestack, our understanding and what I was told was that certain structures within a historical district can be excluded. I believe another council member has, for simplicity, proposed a third map that would just remove the smokestack from the map.
So my question to clarify for me and perhaps people listening is, what does that do for you as far as the developer of the site if that is the stack is excluded?
It allows us to complete this demolition work to make the structure safe without delays or other, potential, ultimately court cases if we have to fight, the city staff recommendation of forcing us or trying to force us to pay for a public art installation in order to comply with this order. We just don't want to get into, a messy legal battle over something that we want to do. And we have liability, like real liability on our hands for a tall structure that could topple over and kill somebody. And we just want to get it done.
Okay. So I understand that you would take the stack down to the height, but if it's taken out of the process, then it allows you to continue on.
That is correct.
Okay. Well, thanks for entertaining my question. And I'm sorry if I jumped the gun. Pardon me.
No problem.
Did you want additional clarification from Mr. Zodi, or?
Please, Mr. Zodi.
Yeah, I just point out to council members that removal of the smokestack, and Daniel Dixon from legal is here as well to clarify anything I might say. But removal of the smokestack would not subject it to any scrutiny at all. So the owner could take it down to 60 feet or could just take it all the way down. It does not protect it historically. So I want to make sure that's clear, that it doesn't subject it to any scrutiny by the Historic Preservation Commission. If we get through this process and it is not included in the map, it becomes a demolition delay process where the HPC just decides to, well, I guess at this point it would just be out. That process wouldn't be undertaken because we're going through this one. So just to clarify that it doesn't protect it at all, I guess at this point, if the stack were to be excluded from the map. So I want to make sure that's crystal clear. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you.
And Councilmember Piedmont Smith.
Yes, I'm a bit confused about this public art installation requirement. That, in my mind, that would be totally separate from any historic designation. Can Mr. Zodi speak to that?
Yeah. Thank you, Councilmember Piedmont Smith. So the question before the Historic Preservation Commission right now is the certificate of appropriateness to, number one, take the smokestack to 60 feet, which is required by the unsafe building order that the hand department issued earlier this year. The COA application currently has a condition on it, which the HPC will come back tomorrow and consider. That it has a conditional approval. So the intent there is to, number one, take the smokestack to 60 feet as soon as possible to be observant of the public safety hazard and all of the things that we've been talking about over the last several weeks. The condition is for the petitioner, the owner, to come back to the Historic Preservation Commission in 45 days to discuss how to commemorate the history of the smokestack. Art installation is not in writing that an art installation was required. That is one of the ideas that's been presented. So that is not set in stone that we are requiring a $150,000 art installation. We are asking the petitioner to come back to us to talk about how the history, the fabric of the Creamery, with the smokestack particularly, would be observed and commemorated if it were taken down to, or following, I should say, it's shortening to 60 feet. Because we do think that that is in line with Title VIII, that it does allow the HPC to ask for those considerations to basically memorialize, commemorate the history of the site. So that is the current language in the staff recommendation for the HPC to consider. And that will be done tomorrow night. The HPC met last week. There was a procedural matter that prevented that from being finalized, so they are coming back for a special session tomorrow night at 5 o'clock. So if council members want to hear the exact language of the COA, we're happy to read that for you, but hopefully that answers your question.
Yes, may I ask a follow-up?
Please.
So if the council, a majority of council decides that the smokestack should not be included, the requirement, the condition of the COA for the rest of the Johnson's Creamery property could still include, you should have a marker somewhere on the approved historic district site that talks about the smokestack.
I'm going to ask legal to join me, maybe, because I want to make sure that I'm following procedure correctly, because I think the COA currently is pending, so that, as you all know, the process is that we're sort of doing this in tandem, where the HPC acted to recommend it to you. We encouraged you to move swiftly, which we appreciate. And so you're considering the designation as the HPC is considering the COA. So removal of the smokestack would put into question the validity of the COA, because the COA is about the smokestack while we have the unsafe order. So I'm going to turn it over to Daniel Dixon and let him make sure that we're clear on that, council member, so that I'm not telling you something incorrect.
Thank you.
Hi, good evening, Daniel Dixon, Assistant City Attorney. John was correct. The one thing I want to clarify is that the particular certificate of appropriateness that's being considered right now is just specific to the smokestack. If it's not designated, then there is no material alteration taking place to a historic structure, and therefore there is no need for a COA, so there wouldn't be a COA effectively to consider. It would be mooted out at that point, and then there would be a COA process that would follow for any kind of development that would happen on the Creamery building proper if that portion is designated.
Gotcha. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Additional items, Councilmember Sims.
Thank you. One of the main things we're here tonight is to talk about the safety of that structure. I am going to say this, though. One of the things I don't like or don't really appreciate is that the council is trying to do some things while other bodies are trying to do some things. And when we got to jump around and fit around or all that stuff. So as long as I sit on this council, I really appreciate that all those other agencies or entities get their work done before it comes to us. That's just my statement. Okay. And thank you all for the presentation, and Mr. Cordero, thank you as well. Being that the issue is safety, and we've decided, or HPC or someone has decided the safe height is 60 feet. One of the things that, and we all are supportive of historic designations. I don't think that's a question. One of the slight things that's kind of always bothered me is, in some cases, is the cost and the expense of maintaining that. So it has to be a partnership. The owners have to be there in order to assume that. We've talked about grants before and how competitive they are. The reality of the matter is it's a very small percentage of people who get them. And that creates more anxiety, more cost for the petitioners. So I guess what I'm saying is, even if it was reduced to 60 feet, what type of guarantees that we can expect that it won't be a safety hazard in the next however length of time, and which would create more expense for the petitioner or whoever is the owner at that point in time, and some other discussions between us and the HPC, for an example.
Would you like me to address that, council member?
Pardon?
Would you like me to respond to that?
I can.
Whomever has an answer.
Okay. I think if the smokestack were still there as a structure, I think we would be mindful of that any historic structure would need to go through a certain scheduled maintenance. So we would rely on the owner to do that, as they would with the rest of the structure. So couldn't make any guarantees that it wouldn't be deteriorate to the condition of being unsafe, just like any other historic structure or any building for that matter. So we would, as we do here at the city, we would ask, we expect property owners to maintain their properties, and if not, then we would look at options like issuing another unsafe order if we felt the building was unsafe. So no guarantees there, certainly.
Is there an estimate on cost of maintaining that? I'm sorry, Ms. Chair, can I?
Please.
Okay. Is there an estimated cost of maintaining that? I mean, it's easy to say it's your responsibility to maintain it. Has anyone thought about an estimate or what it might cost moving
Refer
forward?
to the owners there. We've talked about estimates to, to do the work on the smokestack, to take it down, the height and all of that, but we have not discussed ongoing maintenance costs. I'd have to defer to Peerless on that.
Thank you. Mr. Cordero, would you like to address that?
Yes, we can address that. It certainly will need ongoing maintenance. Part of our first repair effort would be to do, a lot of tuck pointing and try to get it into as solid of a state as possible. But it's older, it will continue to deteriorate, and it will need ongoing, tuck pointing every, if you do spot tuck pointing, it might start in 4 or 5 years, and it might be every couple of years that you're doing spot tuck pointing. And my guess is, just given the height, it's probably $5,000 to $10,000 job every couple of years once it gets started. So it is an ongoing expense, and with now us losing any revenue, and I think this is part of the reason why our grant. Difficult for a building like this or a structure like this to get a grant is it's not functioning. It has a purpose as a historic symbol and an iconic structure, but it doesn't house anybody. It doesn't provide a place for anybody's business to operate. It's just something to look at this point, and that's difficult. It will be a financial, cost to us or any future owner.
Thank you. One of the things that's important to me is usefulness, as he mentioned. And I do believe at Fairview School, we had some of the same issue with the swallows, the birds in there, and that added to the need to preserve all of that, I think, which we don't have at the Johnson Creamery smokestack. So just a statement I wanted to make, and thank you all for answering the questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And let's go into round 2 of questions. Councilmember Sandberg.
My question to you, Ms. Colombrania, is what is the harm in us designating this? I've certainly gotten the sense from my fellow council members of the constituency that I talk with, that historic preservation is important. This Johnson Creamery in its entirety, the building and the smokestack, is important to the skyline of the city and everything else. If we designate tonight, we are in no way stopping the public safety aspect, which I think we're all trying to get to as quickly as possible. We don't want that to be a hazard. So, and I know you can't maybe speak for the Historic Preservation Commission that's going to meet, tomorrow night? But can you give me some idea, are they also equally concerned about the public safety aspect, and they too want to make sure we're doing the right thing with respect to this structure?
Yes, that is correct. The Historic Preservation Commission has a weighty decision tomorrow night. The decision is not really whether the smokestack is going down to 60 feet, but whether or not there will be some sort of interpretation or acknowledgement of the height it used to have.
And that interpretation in no way means build up a high public art sculpture. It could be a simple matter of a plaque. Is that correct? I mean, I can't speak for...
It's very open to interpretation at this point, and it's something that the Historic Preservation Commission has already debated, I believe, over an hour last week, and they will continue discussing tomorrow.
And so once again, I'm just trying to get some assurance, and hopefully we'll hear soon what the Historic Preservation Commission has to say. They too don't want to hold this up and have anybody be harmed by a falling brick.
Right now, it is the tightrope of balancing safety issues with commemoration, with the impossibility of maintaining it at its height. Ideally, if we could just maintain, everybody could maintain it at its height safely efficiently, that would be ideal. However, this is a very delicate and complicated situation to the point where the bricks are not even made anymore, and they are barely available. And the bricks available on the smokestack itself, some of them are highly deteriorated. So this is a situation where 60 feet is what the engineers recommended as the highest it can be at a safe level. And they did do very comprehensive studies. And at this point, it's really a matter of trying not to lose the entire stack and have something that symbolized that industry. It's not only the smokestack, it's the whole smokestack industry that barely exists anymore in Bloomington, in Indiana. There are other smokestacks in the United States, but the brick smokestack is something that's becoming rarer and rarer. And so to even have a piece of that will become an educational tool in the future, especially when we're thinking about environmental concerns, about the history of industry, the history of food, and all of these other things that have shaped our community.
Thank you, that's very helpful.
Thank you. Additional questions from council? Okay, seeing none, let's go to public comment. For those of you who would like to offer public comment, what did I miss? Sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry, Madam Chair, but usually if we have an amendment,
Yes.
it's introduced before we go to public comment.
Good, let's do that.
So that the public can then comment on the amendment and on the item as amended if it
You're right.
is.
Would you like to go ahead?
Yes, thank you. Madam Chair, I move Amendment 2 to Ordinance 2206. Actually, is it moved or just in committee?
Let's just move it. And is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. So would you please present? Go ahead.
Yes. First of all, I'd like to make it clear that I did not talk to Mr. Cardero or anyone from Peerless Development. This amendment is proposed by myself and of my own accord. And it is to remove the smokestack from the boundaries of the proposed historic district and to accept the boundaries of the historic district closer to the building footprint as presented by the petitioner in his memo last week. So basically, I just don't feel like a smokestack that is, first of all, I guess, okay, let me just stick with the height issue, and that is it must be reduced to a 60-foot maximum height. I feel like that does not really allow for preservation of the historic record. And since we cannot, due to engineering and building standards, maintain the smokestack at its original height, and it has to be reduced by more than half, I don't see any point in keeping it. I'm more flexible about the footprint being greater or more narrow, but excluding the smokestack is something that I feel strongly about. So anyway, I wanted to present this and get colleagues' feedback and also feedback from the staff.
We'll come to council for questions, or do we want to hear a comment from staff first? Let's go to staff then. Mr. Zodi or Ms. Colombrana? And may I ask if you have this to project? Perhaps you could project it for,
I'm sorry, the Amendment 2?
Amendment 2's map. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you everybody for allowing me to speak again. Can you hear me? Okay, so this is the second map that is being presented as an amendment. There was a previous map that included the smokestack, but which hugged the structure. So it excluded most of the grounds, maintained a little bit of the grounds in front, just a little corner, but excluded most of the grounds so that the new development would not be impacted at all by the historic district. Staff has maintained a position of neutrality with that regard. In other words, it doesn't oppose it in any way whatsoever. So that in order for the owners to be able to work with their development without having to ask for a certificate of appropriateness each time they are going to do something with the new building. That said, staff does not support this version of the map that excludes the smokestack, because even if the smokestack is reduced, it still conveys a very important historic component of the city and of the Creamery. I also wanted to relay that Commissioner Sam DeSolar from the HPC said he couldn't be here, but he wanted to convey that he supports the peerless map with the smokestack. So it's an identical map to this one, but with a little circle where the smokestack is located, but that he does not support this version of the map. I can forward the email to Stephen Lucas so that he can share it with everybody. And yeah, that's kind of where we're at. Okay. Feel free to let me know if you have any questions.
Okay. May I ask a question? May I jump in here? So just to clarify, there are three maps in play. There is the original map that you presented, which kind of named as a historic district that entire lot.
That is correct.
The second map, which hugs the building and the smokestack more closely.
Yes.
And the third map, which hugs the building and excludes the smokestack.
That is correct.
So that's 1, 2, and 3. Got it. Thank
Yes.
you. But additional questions from council or comments?
May we see map number 2?
Mr. Lucas, may we see map number 2?
Let me just clarify where we are, and yes, we can display that. The recommendation from the HPC includes the map that was included with the ordinance originally that Ms. Colombrania just referenced. An Amendment 1 was prepared and previously distributed in the event a council member would like to take that up and offer it as a change. And then Councilmember Piedmont Smith authored this Amendment 2, which the only difference is it excludes the smokestack. So we're discussing Amendment 2. I'm happy to display Amendment 1, but at this point, no council member has offered to introduce that or to move it. So if it just helps for, in considering this amendment, I'm happy to display that, but just wanted to clarify.
Okay, and to clarify, Mr. Lucas, would we need to resolve Amendment 2 before going to Amendment 1?
Yes.
Very well. Okay. Additional questions from council on Amendment 2? Before we go to public comment?
So.
Oh, wait, no, then we
sorry,
have to do Amendment 1.
Just, I'll note this is the map that would be attached to Amendment 1 should that come up. You'll notice the only difference here again is the inclusion of the smokestack. So again, that amendment is not on the table at this time.
If I may, I would be willing to sponsor that amendment of the close hug and the inclusion of the stack for when we get to that point.
Okay. Thank you, Councilmember Sandberg. So, Mr. Lucas, help me remember, do we need a public comment on this amendment now, correct? And then a vote?
Typically, the council offers public comment on the amendment before taking up any additional amendments and then returning to the ordinance as amended.
Okay. Good. For those of us who are joining us virtually, if you'd like to offer comment on Amendment 2, please indicate by using the raise hand function in Zoom, or please type a message into chat, and our meeting hosts will watch for that and let us know that you'd like to speak. For those in council chambers, if you could indicate if you'd like to speak, and that will help plan time. 2? Okay. I see 2 in chambers. And there's 1 in Zoom. All right. And they're conferring. There are 2 in Zoom. Let us say 5 minutes. And if you would, when you step up to the microphone, please sign in for us. Then please state your full name, and then you'll have 5 minutes. And Ms. Lacey will take care of the timer for us. Thank you. And this is on Amendment 2.
Campbell. I'm an advisory member to the Historic Preservation Commission, and I've been on the commission since 1992, either as a voting or an advisory member, with a short hiatus when I was teaching at Ball State University in the Architecture College, and my job there was as the director of the graduate program in historic preservation. I've spent my entire career in the field of historic preservation, and as a matter of fact, in 1993, I was hired by Joe Harrell to restore the Johnson Creamery building. My office also put the building on the National Register of Historic Places. And so those are my credentials. The amendment, I know I'm just supposed to speak to the amendment, but in fact, the amendment speaks to the entire issue of boundary. The National Register nomination boundary is the property line. That is standard procedure at the National Register of Historic Places. The reason for that is historic National Register properties are protected by certain kinds of federal law, primarily the encroachment of federal money through licensing or construction. So licensing, say, a cell tower on historic property would be reviewed in a process called 106 review by a federal agency to see if those monies impact the building negatively, and if they do, there's usually some kind of mitigation agreement that happens. Or if a federal highway wants to go through that property, it's protected at its boundary for the same process, 106 review. Local historic designations have followed that model historically. So local historic districts, every one I know of in Bloomington, follows the property line, okay? The purpose for that is the same. If you want to protect a historic property, a building on a property, you assume that the property is what engages that building. It also tells the story of the history of the building. So you don't typically subdivide historic properties to isolate buildings when the story is being told by the entire site. And it's easy to lose sight of the fact that that parking lot behind the Creamery was full of compression equipment in order to create refrigeration facilities for the Creamery itself. Those were removed during the historic rehabilitation because of the requirement of the city for parking. It wasn't because the National Register wanted them removed. We had to argue to remove them. I will also say that that building received a federal historic tax credit for the owner, which is the primary incentive of monies to protect, to enhance the development of historic properties. We've been talking about grants. There are very, very few grants for anything other than nonprofit entities engaging historic preservation, period. The major for-profit incentive is historic tax credits, which would be available to someone who restored the smokestack if they desired. Whether they would be available to destroy it is another question. So that's a little bit of background on boundary. So you typically do not reduce the boundary to the footprint of the building because it disenables you for your ability to protect the building. So if you make it the footprint, and this petitioner or any other owner, and remember, we're talking about perpetual preservation here. Any other owner wants to build right up to, they could build right up to the footprint without any oversight by a Historic Preservation Commission, which is the agency in this city and state and federal that is enabled by law to protect the building. So it's very difficult to protect the building when the boundary is the edge of the building, okay? So theoretically, and I'm not saying Mr. Cordero wants to do this, theoretically, you could build a building literally within an inch of the Johnson Creamery building, up over it as high as you wanted to go without any oversight by the local agency that's supposed to supervise alterations to that building. Technically, you couldn't call it an alteration because it's not touching the building, but it still seriously impacts the historic significance and integrity of the building. So our staff has recommended that the boundary be the front half of the lot, understanding that a new building is going to be built in the parking lot. We don't necessarily endorse a new building in the parking lot of the Creamery, but we're recognizing that it's a reality, and so we've created a boundary that is the front half of the lot in order
Mr.
to
Campbell,
protect.
could you finish up your comments, please? That's exhausted your time, but if you have a sentence, go ahead.
Okay, so, and the other sentence is, you can't take a designated site and take part of the building away and still call it the same site. So you can't take the stack away. It's part of the deal.
Thank
okay?
you.
And that's what we're trying to protect. Thank you.
Thank you. Additional comment from in chambers? Yes, please. If you would, please share your full name, and then you'll have 5 minutes.
Okay. Yes, I'm Karen Duffy, and I have a prepared statement from my neighborhood association, so it kind of covers nomination and any possible amendments. Oops. Okay. Dear council members, the Near West Side Neighborhood Association Board of Directors unanimously supports the designation of Johnson's Creamery as a local historic district. We believe that the Creamery, a complex consisting of 2 buildings, a smokestack, and the grounds immediately surrounding them, more than meets the required criteria for designation due to its historical and architectural significance, as detailed in the nomination prepared by hand staff and approved by the Historic Preservation Commission. With a border located just a block west of the Johnson property, our neighborhood enjoys special historic ties with it. Many of our houses were home to Creamery workers. Many of our households were regular customers. Preparing the nomination for our own recently designated conservation district has raised our awareness of these ties and heightened our appreciation of the Creamery's larger importance as an early industry in the city of Bloomington. Further, we, like many others in Bloomington today, regard the Creamery with its iconic smokestack as a landmark of our city and the complex of buildings and stack as representative of a distinct industrial building form. Along with the Creamery's historical significance then, its unique architectural character is one we value and want to see recognized and protected by historic district status. In supporting designation, we want to be clear on 2 points. First, we oppose any effort to amend the boundary of the proposed historic district to follow the building and smokestack footprint. Such an amendment goes against historic preservation practice, which rightly maintains that if a property is to be protected from possible intrusions, it must include sufficient surrounding space for doing so. Second, we oppose any effort to remove the smokestack from the nomination. Even if the stack were reduced in height, as it seems destined to be, it would still meet the stated criteria owing to its importance in the city's history and as an essential component of a nationally significant architectural type, that is, a coal-powered industrial building complex. In conclusion, we believe that designation and the protections it brings are crucial for the Creamery at this time in its history. Given that a large development has been approved for its current parking lot area, we feel that the complex not only merits but needs HPC oversight, including adequate space around the buildings, to safeguard the site's character into the future. Therefore, we respectfully ask you to approve the nomination before you this evening. And this is signed by the Board of Directors of the Near West Side Association, those being Peter Dorfman, President, Alan Balcom, Vice President, William Baus, Treasurer, Tom Payne, Secretary, and Olivia Dorfman, Karen Duffy, and Natalia Galvin, Representatives at Large. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Duffy. Okay. And Ms. Lacey, if we could, let's go to our Zoom participants.
Okay, the First speaker will be the person with the screen name, Chris Sturbaum, who should be able to unmute.
Yes, I believe I'm unmuted. Can you hear me?
Yes, Mr. Sturbaum, please share your full name, and you'll have 5 minutes then.
Chris Sturbaum, hello, council. I think it would be important for me to explain how the Historic Commission meeting ended the other day. I don't know if you got the details, but the petitioner was fine with the chimney being included, and the HPC thought they had voted to simply approve the demolition to 60 feet, but there had been a discussion about the art installation. And as it turned out, in retrospect, after a vote to allow the demolition down to 60 feet and the petitioner left thinking that was that, there had been a misunderstanding and a couple of the voters had voted thinking they were putting the art exhibit on the table or the additional interpretation business on the table, so that they actually unvoted, and that's why we're having a meeting tomorrow. So I think the most interesting thing is that the petitioner was fine with the smokestack being included, and now maybe he's seeing a chance to completely exclude it. And I think he was also annoyed by the process, which was a little embarrassing. So, I think we have a situation where we can have a win-win where everyone agrees that it has to come down for safety. The petitioner knows that that's part of the process. And there could be some kind of recognition that even could be sponsored by the Historic Commission that would put up a plaque and explain things and not cause extra expense to the petitioner. So removing the chimney is simply not necessary and not really proper for a local designation. Even there are even commemorations of ruins that are just the foundation of a historic property, so that a partial chimney is a memory of that full chimney smokestack. So I thought I would just give you some background and what's happened and what's probably going to happen tomorrow, so that Councilmember Sims will not have to act without hearing what's going on. And that's, unfortunately, we weren't able to resolve it, but I'm sure we will be able to tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sturbaum. Ms. Lacey, who else do we have?
Next, we have the person with the screen name Janice Sorby, who should be able to unmute.
Ms. Sorby, welcome. Please go ahead and state your full name, and then you'll have 5 minutes.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Okay, my name is Jan Sorby, and excuse me, I sit on the board of Bloomington Restoration Incorporated. And for people that don't realize it, Bloomington Restoration, AKA BRI, is responsible for saving the courthouse on the courthouse square. I sit on the Endangered Historic Properties Committee and chair that. And I'm here to ask you to reject the proposal to make the boundary at the footprint. And I'd like to dovetail into something that Duncan Campbell was talking about. The issue on the table is where to put the boundaries for the district. The boundary in the nomination packet was prepared by hand, approved by Bloomington Historic Preservation Commission members. The HPC essentially is speaking for what is best for the Johnson Creamery building in nominating it, and what's best for Bloomington. They know the history of Bloomington, the importance of the site in Bloomington context, and they understand the guidance from the Secretary of Interior. The guidance from the Secretary of Interior stresses the importance of having sufficient space around the building if it is to protect it from possible intrusions. The more important the building, the more space is needed to be included in the district. The Secretary of Interior emphasizes the high value of protecting the view shed. View shed is something that's not been talked about tonight. They stress that without the protection of a view shed, the integrity of the building is seriously compromised. So I'm asking council to follow the advice of the Secretary of Interior. Reject the change desired by the developer because it would essentially make local designation meaningless. The northern boundary, including in the nomination packet, must be protected for local designation to have meaning. Again, I just want to say that I understand that the developer wants to include, get closer and closer to the building, but the building must be able to be seen to be viable. It must have to be protected from a building so close that the view shed is compromised. And so I'm asking you in all earnestness to please consider the original property line as the designated historic property. And this is what your experts in Bloomington understand and know is best for Bloomington and for the Johnson Creamery. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Sorby. Ms. Lacey, do we have additional speakers?
Next is the petitioner, but perhaps council would prefer to hear public comment and then allow the petitioner to comment without the time limit once public comment is finished.
I'd like to stay focused on public comment for now.
And then it appears that there is one other person with their hand raised, and that person is the person with the screen name Natalia Galvin, who should be able to unmute.
Welcome, Ms. Galvin. If you would, please state your full name for the record, and you'll have 5 minutes.
Yes, thank you. My name is Natalia Galvin, and I am a member of the Near West Side Board of Directors. I don't want to take up more of your time. It's already 8:22. To just echo my support. Our neighborhood association has been aware of this and has been working with Ms. Sorby, who's doing some great work on this, Mr. Duncan, but our neighborhood is very concerned about this. And I just want to echo, Ms. Duffy's great advocacy as our board member, that many neighbors are concerned and watching today. This is probably, we were counting, maybe this is our 4th meeting on this, but it's important to us and we're paying attention to it. So thank you so much for hearing my comment tonight.
Thank you. Ms. Lacey, any additional commenters?
No, excuse me. No, there are no additional commenters.
Thank you. And anything additional in chambers? I don't see anyone. Okay. Seeing none, let's come back to council for council questions, additional questions. Councilmember Rollo.
Did the petitioner wish to make a comment?
Go ahead.
Yes, I just wanted to make a comment to the border and sort of to Mr. Campbell's comment about building a building, 1 inch away. In fact, the property line is being regarded in pretty much 3 sides of the proposed boundary. And then there are other building codes that would prevent us from doing something like that. So I don't think that it is completely disregarded or that the historical character would have no coverage. There are other restrictions in place that would not allow us to build any structures close to this. I completely appreciate the comments about having sufficient space. This is a tight site regardless, and where the new approved building is and where the parking is for this and the walkways, it's almost to that boundary line as it is. So that's all I wanted to say in regards to the proposed map. And just reiterate, I guess, that the proposed map does go through a bottom section of the newly proposed building. That can't be overlooked. Thank you.
Thank you. Additional council questions before we go to council comment? Okay, then let's go to council comment. Councilmember Rallo.
Thank you. I find that the smokestack is integral in the structure's history and the form of the building. It is iconic. It identifies the building. I think you could probably draw a silhouette of the building and ask a Bloomington resident to identify the building, and they would be able to do so because of the smokestack. So I think that it really is important in preservation. It may require alteration, but it needs to be preserved at least in whole or in part. So I'll be voting against the amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. Additional comment? Oh, I'm sorry, Councilmember Smith.
Thank you. I'm going to concur with Councilmember Rallo that smokestack's really important that we keep it as it's kind of an icon of the site. So I will be voting against this amendment as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Additional comments? Councilmember Sandberg.
Yes, I too must oppose amendment number 2 with respect to the entire area that needs to be respected, and in listening to comments from the public and also even from the petitioner, who even recognizes that he cannot build some structure just right up against that. I think he realizes the importance of what he's purchased and what he intended to develop along with his new development, and so I am inclined to go in another direction here. So thank you.
Thank you. Additional comments? Councilmember Piedmont Smith.
Yeah, I appreciate the discussion tonight. I'm still not convinced that it's valuable to the community, that it's valuable to the tune of $350,000 to the community to keep the smokestack in place. Now, I understand that, of course, there is an expense to take the whole thing down as well. So we might be talking about maybe a $100,000 difference. So I mean, all my life, I grew up in Bloomington, and driving up to Indianapolis, seeing the smokestacks, as you approach 465, it's always been very negative in my mind. Of course, those function and still spew pollution as opposed to this one. But I don't know, just protecting a smokestack is just not, to me, it's not significant, and I'm a Bloomingtonian. So I would be more inclined to go back and revise this amendment or propose one that accepts the boundaries that the HPC proposed, which are bigger than the building footprint. I have been convinced of that by the conversation this evening, but I still am not convinced about the smokestack. So I'm going to just, today I'm going to vote in favor of this amendment, although I think I would rather do the bigger building footprint, but I'm just not convinced that we have to save this smokestack. Thank you.
Thank you. Additional comment? Okay, if not, I'll take a turn. I'm going to bundle some of my comments together here. This was a really interesting discussion. Thank you. And my mind has changed twice in the last 45 minutes. So well done, all of you. The first question for me was whether or not historic designation is merited at all for Johnson Creamery. And that was a fairly settled question in my mind. It is historically significant. It was a major industry in town. Generations work there, so historic designation is merited. The question then becomes what to do about the smokestack. And Councilmember Piedmont Smith makes a good point about what smokestacks symbolize. I grew up in a smokestack town. I grew up in Gary, Indiana, and we used to marvel at how lovely the sunsets were, but we really didn't think too much about why they were so red or why they were so pink. So I understand that smokestacks can also conjure up that feeling as well. And yet, then Ms. Colombrania said something that really struck me. You spoke about very eloquently about the educational role of having a smokestack and what it means to be able to point to something and talk about it and talk about what it meant. Even if our families didn't necessarily work in that smokestack industry, there are generations in Bloomington that did. And that was very compelling to me, so I appreciate that comment as well. I appreciate comments from the public, too, that spoke about the importance of leaving a margin around the building beyond just a few inches, not just hugging the building. So thank you all for the discussion on this. I am inclined not to support Amendment 2, and I've given some indication, too, of where I'm leaning in terms of any future amendments that might come up. So thank you. Any additional comments? Is there a recommendation on Amendment 2?
Move to pass.
Thank you. I'll start on my right this time. Councilmember Sims?
Yes.
Councilmember Sandberg?
No.
I will vote no. Councilmember Rallo?
No.
Councilmember Smith?
No.
Councilmember Piedmont Smith?
Yes.
That is 2 yes, 4 no. That amendment does not receive a positive recommendation. So,
And Madam Chair, given the public comment that we have heard, I will not be willing to introduce Amendment 1.
thank you. Okay. Which, unless I'm mistaken, takes us back to 2206 in its entirety. All right, are there additional council questions? So we are back to our 2206 in its original form without amendments. Are there additional council questions? Either for the property owner or for our staff? Seeing none, is there any additional public comment? Yes, please. I see one in chambers. If you would like to offer public comment and are participating virtually, please go ahead and either use the raise hand function in Zoom or type a message into chat, and our meeting host will shepherd that process when that time comes. This is public comment on the ordinance. It's not amended. Right. So. Okay. Welcome, and again, if you would state your full name, please, and then you'll have 5 minutes.
My name is Duncan Campbell. Am I right that we're now to address the proposal to designate the site?
That's correct.
With
This
the
is
original map.
ordinance.
With the original map. I want to reiterate a little bit about the importance of the building. And obviously, I have a vested interest in it. I won't hide it. I spent many years restoring that building, and I'm quite proud of it. And I've worked on several historic buildings in Bloomington, including the one we're standing in, and as an advisor to many more across the state. And I won't be able to quote this exactly, but a famous economist once said that the only advocacy group he knew of that never had to look back with regret were the people who were advocating for historic preservation. And that has been so true in my life. I don't know how much emphasis I can give it. It's never wrong when the site merits the recognition, and to not recognize your community and the effort that's gone into it, and to build it and to sustain it is wrong. And there are many, many other sites, and we're now looking at all the National Register locations in Bloomington to potentially protect with local districting, because frankly, there's so much development coming in so fast and so hard that we almost can't act fast enough. And this isn't intended as a statement against the current owner of the Johnson Creamery. There have been 2 or 3 owners since I was involved in it, and in no way mean to denigrate the development community. I've been part of it myself. It's still true that when we look at these things and we try to commemorate them and we want to make a statement about what our community means to us, we're passing that statement along with these buildings. We're not going to be here to talk about it anymore, but the buildings will be. And the more of them we can recognize the importance of, and the better job we can do to protect them. And that means protect them from ourselves as well as encroachers. So, you know, we have an agency in town that does a pretty good job. It's not perfect, but it does a pretty good job of protecting these buildings. And it speaks to this issue every time it meets, okay? And it's a hard thing to do. And it's a hard thing to talk about all the time. And frankly, preservationists take it on the chin a lot because of what they're trying to do, which is also wrong. So, you know, we need to step up and protect these buildings and recognize who we are and what we care about. And I realize that people want to come in and build buildings, maybe not right up against them, but virtually right up against them, if you will. And that's not always the right thing to do, okay? You wouldn't allow somebody to build an apartment building on the courthouse square on the courthouse lawn, I don't think. So, you know, we need to be careful about this as we respect, you know, development rights and the desire to move on and to have progress. We can still acknowledge our community, and we can still stand up for the things that our forebears did and did right, actually. It's nobody's fault that we don't need creameries anymore. Kroger has taken care of that for us. But we did need them, and a huge part of the community. I mean, that wonderful picture of horse-drawn carriages alongside motorized vehicles, that's who delivered the milk here for 75 years, okay? Let's don't forget that, and let's don't forget this building, and let's don't forget what we're trying to do tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone in addition to Mr. Campbell? Not seeing any here in chambers. Ms. Lacey?
No takers.
Okay, and seeing none on Zoom? Let's actually come back for any additional council comment or council questions. What? Oh, I'm sorry. Councilmember Sandberg.
Yoo-hoo. Well, it's hard to follow Mr. Campbell, who I certainly appreciate his expertise and his knowledge, and I certainly concur with the idea that it is important to preserve our heritage and our history. It's not frivolous. It's not to be looked upon as just, you know, not willing to be a part of the change and the progress that we all have to face when our times change. So I think this is a small step that we can take to designate this, preserve it. The smokestack is a concern from a health issue and a health and safety issue, and therefore I am not completely opposed to the idea that it may need to come down farther than 60 feet if that's what protects the community. But I think the fact that at least a semblance of that stays as a memorial commemorative feature in some form or fashion. It doesn't have to be expensive, but this is an issue obviously for the HPC to wrestle with. But public safety is paramount. That's why I wanted to kind of fast track this tonight to get the designation underway so we can move on to the next phase, which is to protect the safety of our community, get that beeline trail open as soon as we can, the portion of it that's been closed. So as far as the petitioner goes, I wish them well in their new project. I'm sure they can work around it in a way that is respectful and is not a hindrance to what it is that they've designed and what they want to do. So again, we respect the old, we respect the new as it comes in, and we can live together harmoniously. I'm pretty sure of that. Thank you.
Thank you. Additional comments? Seeing none, is there a recommendation on 2206?
Move to pass.
Thank you. I'll start on my right this time. Councilmember Sims?
Yes.
Councilmember Sandberg?
Yes.
I will vote yes. Councilmember Rollo?
Yes.
Councilmember Smith?
Yes.
And Councilmember Piedmont Smith?
Yes.
That is 6 yes, 0 no. Thank you, everyone. That concludes the business we had on our agenda for this evening. We will be convening next on Wednesday, April 6th at 6:30 p.m. in regular session here in council chambers and on Zoom. If there are no objections,
excuse me.
Oh, pardon me.
Mr. Cordero, I believe, has raised his hand and is on screen. Do you want to Do you want to?
Yes.
Back to 2206.
We were told that as a matter of process that the voting does not happen this week and actually happens next week.
That's correct. This is a recommendation this evening, not a final vote.
Gotcha. Okay, understood. Do we have time, hearing the comments from the public about the need for more space, do we have time to propose a new boundary line that would map our proposed subdivision line?
I would suggest you work with hand staff on that. Is that acceptable, Mr. Zodi? Yes. Please do reach out to Mr. Zodi for that. So
Okay, we will.
it would be a new amendment. It would be a new amendment.
Correct. Thank you.
And so please work with Mr. Zodi. Then if there's an additional amendment, it can come to us next week. So anything
Great.
else for
Thank
the
you
good of
very
the
much.
order? Thank you. Anything else for the good of the order? If not, we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.